All right. I used my Gemini notebook to create a beginner's guide to basically CIA espionage and magic. And this is a declassified book that I've used here. These are just the basics, a quick concept collection. I'm probably going to do a bigger one, but this is the introduction or the beginner's guide, if you will.
Welcome to this explainer. We're diving straight into something pretty mind-blowing today, the shared DNA between stage magic and Cold War espionage. It's crazy to think about, but pulling a rabbit out of a hat and secretly passing a microfilm capsule on a crowded street, they actually rely on the exact same principles of human psychology. So what do a stage magician and a CIA operative actually have in common? At first glance, it feels like an absurd question. You've got two professions with wildly different stakes. One's under bright theater lights for a paying audience, and the other is operating in the shadows, where a single mistake literally means geopolitical disaster or worse. But as we're going to see, their toolkits are practically identical. Now that underlying purpose, to control exactly what the human eye and brain perceive as reality, that doesn't come from some magic textbook. That is a direct quote from a declassified CIA manual of trickery and deception. The agency literally commissioned a famous stage magician during the Cold War to train field operatives, because the goal isn't just hiding something. It's about taking the wheel of a target's brain and fundamentally dictating what they perceive as reality in that specific moment. Section 1. The Magician and the Spy, blending two worlds of deception. To understand how basic parlor tricks evolved into essential field tactics, we just need to compare their ultimate goals. The magician wants to entertain in a highly controlled environment, right? They want you to know you're being tricked. But a spy's goal is covert survival and mission success in deeply hostile territory. They absolutely cannot let you know a trick even happened. So the stakes are worlds apart, applause versus life or death. But the physical mechanics of the deception, the actual manipulation of human attention, exactly the same. Section 2. The Psychology of Misdirection. The Mental Setup. Because here's the real secret to how manual deception tactics actually work. A successful trick always starts in the mind, never the hands. Before an operative even moves a muscle to hide something, they have to prime the target's brain. When a deception event happens, 90% of human attention goes straight to the loud distraction. A sudden noise, a wide gesture, maybe a spilled drink, leaving just 10% of attention for the actual sleight of hand. We are biologically wired to look at the biggest, most obvious movement, and the spy knows this. They use that 90% movement to completely mask the tiny 10% movement where the real work gets done. Which brings us to a foundational psychological concept from the manual that both magicians and spies weaponize. It's called inattentional blindness. Basically, it's the brain's failure to notice a fully visible but unexpected object simply because your attention was engaged somewhere else. What this means in practice is that a spy doesn't have to literally make an object invisible. They just have to make sure your brain's processing power is temporarily maxed out on a distraction. Try this quick thought experiment for a second. Imagine a sudden, loud crash of breaking glass right to your left. Naturally, involuntarily, your eyes are going to dart toward that sound, right? Well, in that exact split second, you've created a massive blind spot directly in front of you. You literally wouldn't notice if someone across the table swapped your coffee cup because your brain was too busy assessing the broken glass. That is inattentional blindness in action. Section 3. Mechanics of sleight of hand, the physical execution. Once that mental blind spot is locked in, the operative leans on physical mechanics. And the declassified manual breaks these movements down meticulously. It's basically a masterclass in moving your body so nobody suspects the thing. Think about the last time you dropped your keys, or maybe a napkin. Dropping something is universally perceived as just a clumsy, harmless accident. Nobody instantly assumes a dropped pen is an act of espionage. And since it's so common, it is the ultimate mundane action for a covert setup. This incredibly simple concept turns into a literal step-by-step procedure for highly sensitive field operations. Step 1 is the setup. The operative purposely drops an item, like a lighter. Step 2 is the misdirection. Both the operative and the target instinctively look down at the falling object. And step 3 is the execution. While the target's eyes are glued to the floor, the operative's free hand covertly slips a pill into a drink or grabs a document. The target never even sees it because their brain was completely hijacked by a falling napkin. The manual outlines 4 core physical movements for this. They are absolute standard fare for stage performers, but adapted strictly for espionage survival. You've got palming, which is hiding an object naturally in the curvature of your hands so it still looks completely relaxed. Passing, where you move an item seamlessly between hands under the guise of scratching an itch or adjusting a cuff. Ditching is covertly getting rid of evidence, and loading is secretly introducing an item into a scene like planting a listening device.
But here's the catch. According to the CIA manual, despite all that physical dexterity, there is exactly one overriding element. Just one single factor that determines whether any of these moves succeed or if the spy gets caught red-handed.
That element is timing. The physical execution absolutely must happen on the offbeat. It has to align perfectly with the target's natural rhythm. So what exactly is the offbeat? Well, think of a tense conversation. When someone asks a tough question, that is the beat. Attention is peaking. But when that person laughs, leans back, and takes a breath, that's the offbeat. It's a micro moment of physical and psychological relaxation, and that fraction of a second is precisely when the operative makes their move.
Section 4. Exploiting everyday blind spots, turning the lens back on you.
When you put these tactics side by side, it's pretty wild to see how they exploit our most basic vulnerabilities. The operational context changes entirely, sure, but the structural hack on the human brain remains absolutely identical. Making a coin vanish on stage, that uses the exact same palming and misdirection techniques as an operative hiding stolen microfilm. A magician forcing you to pick a specific card uses the same psychological nudging a spy uses to guide a target's walking path down a specific alleyway. And pulling a rabbit from an empty hat, that is the exact same spatial trickery used to suddenly produce a concealed weapon from a seemingly flat coat.
The manual explicitly zeroes in on these everyday behavioral loops. We inherently assume mundane movements like tying a shoe are totally innocent. We're socially conditioned to implicitly follow a speaker's eye contact, so if I look up, you look up. We naturally drop our guard and relax our attention completely after a tense moment passes. And when we're heavily focused on a singular task, our peripheral awareness just drops to zero. These completely normal ways of interacting with the world are exactly what makes us so susceptible to deception.
Ultimately, it all boils down to this. The brain simply hacks itself. The spy doesn't need to perform some impossible feat of magic. They aren't wizards. They merely provide the physical setup, a dropped pen, a loud noise, a sudden glance upward, and your own psychological assumptions, your own biological wiring, do all the heavy lifting. You fill in the blanks, and in doing so, you deceive yourself.
So, let this final, somewhat unsettling thought sink in as we wrap up this explainer. If your incredibly complex, highly evolved brain can be so easily hacked by a simple hand gesture, a carefully timed laugh, or a dropped napkin, what else are you missing right now? The next time you look at something totally mundane or your attention gets pulled away by a sudden noise, you might just have to wonder what the illusionist spy is doing right behind you. Thanks for joining me, and stay curious.